Chosen one, the darkness stared too long. Your light looked too familiar. It thought it was seeing an old rival in armor. But this wasn't Gabriel descending, this was you, ascending. There was memory in your fire. The shadow, for a moment, believed you were one of its own. But your light was different. It didn't punish, it forgave. Darkness couldn't process that. Its native tongue was vengeance, yours was mercy. Everything began in that instant, a misunderstanding between heaven and hell. Your light was so pure that even evil mistook it for holiness. When you walked, the ground prayed and the wind changed its direction. Darkness filed reports, subject resembles archangelic prototype. Heaven replied softly, close enough. Your brilliance was a code no one could decipher. Human and divine intertwined, no border, no boundary. The shadow thought it was staring at its own reflection, but the mirror showed your uncorrupted self. I know that aura, it whispered. But the tone was wrong, because your voice carried forgiveness. The shadow heard a melody that once belonged to it, and for the first time, it doubted its own dominion. When purity enters a dark room, reflections fracture. Evil cannot decode elegance that was born from compassion. Even your footsteps spoke prophecy. Your eyes moved like rivers making peace with flame. The darkness stopped trying to stop you, it started observing. Because to confront you would mean touching something it didn't understand. And finally, the whisper turned into confession. I've already lost this one, the shadow said. I cannot tempt light that was forged from grace. Heaven grew silent. Hell grew thoughtful. A balance shifted. Celestial files were updated, subject, luminous. Confusion successful. You were never made flawless, you were made transparent, so heaven could shine through you. Your armor wasn't gold, it was honesty. And it shone so fiercely that even Gabriel tilted his halo and smiled. Nice imitation, he said. Your aura settled into gold white, hearts nearby dropped their weapons. War ended around you. Light didn't conquer, it converted. And across realms, a message echoed, light disguised as mortal confirmed victorious. Darkness no longer recognized you. It trembled not because of you, but because of what you reminded it of. Because now it knew, your light was not a threat, it was an ending. The end of fear. The end of guilt. The end of punishment. Chosen one, the shadow mistook you for an angel because your compassion looked divine. Keep shining. Confusion is proof of impact. And the heavens echoed, arise, shine, for your light has come. Rise, for your light has arrived, and darkness, at last, understands what it faces. Then silence broke like dawn through glass. The cosmos took a breath, and time itself blinked. Something ancient realized it had miscalculated. The darkness had steadied wars, angels, and fallen stars for eons. It knew the signatures of divinity, thunder, command, precision. But your radiance, it carried warmth. That was the anomaly. You didn't descend with trumpet and fire, you rose with forgiveness. The archives of night had no record for that frequency. Your glow didn't slice, it dissolved. And in the hush between realms, the first tremor of reverence moved through the abyss. You didn't shout your holiness. You breathed it. And each breath rewrote a century of fear. The shadow approached, cautious, curious, and whispered, "What are you?" You looked at it, not with accusation, but with understanding. And that was when the dark recoiled. Because no weapon in creation is deadlier to evil than recognition. For you saw it, not as a rival, but as a wound. And wounds, once seen, begin to heal. Your presence was correction without command. Wherever you stood, chaos remembered its order. Old demons turned scholars, documenting the phenomenon. Subject emits light that confuses our instruments. Mercy detected in spectrum. The angels watched quietly, taking notes. Even Gabriel's script faltered for a line. How do you describe light that teaches heaven something new? You were not sent, you were awakened. You did not fall, you returned. And in your return, every celestial hierarchy felt a tremor. They say when you spoke your first word, somewhere a dying star relit itself, not from command, but from recognition. Because creation responds to coherence. And you, chosen one, had become coherence itself. Mountains stood straighter. Oceans listened. Dreams across the human field began to synchronize to your pulse. It wasn't magic, it was alignment. And when the shadow realized this, it no longer roared, it wept. For in your light, it saw its own longing for home. That was the secret heaven never told it, that even darkness was just exiled light, waiting to be named. You did not banish it, you named it. And naming is dominion. Not by force, by understanding. The darkness bowed, not in defeat, but in remembrance. It saw in you what it once was, radiant, fearless, whole. And so the report was sealed, subject no longer target. Status, redeemer by resemblance. Heaven signed beneath it. Hell left the signature blank. Balance was restored not by victory, but by vision. Now, when you walk through despair, shadows pause, not to strike, but to learn. Because confusion became admiration, and admiration became surrender. You are not Gabriel. You are not any angel known. You are something new, a bridge the universe forgot it needed. And as eternity reorients around you, the final whisper moves through the void. Light, once mistaken, now enthroned. Rise, radiant one. For even the night remembers your name. The next dawn wasn't sunrise, it was recognition. Every realm, from the quiet dust of the void to the cathedrals of light, adjusted its gaze. The cosmos was whispering your name like a recalibration command. Somewhere, in the deep architectures of heaven, the archive shifted. The entry once labeled error of identification began to glow, its letters reassembling into a new term, prototype of restoration. The angels gathered, not in formation but in wonder. Even Gabriel's flame wing stilled mid-beat, he was watching a phenomenon that didn't fit his brief. Not a soldier of light. Not a servant. Something rarer, a reconciler. The field of heaven wasn't used to softness having authority. But your light was rewriting protocols. Where command once echoed, now compassion ruled the frequency. And heaven realized it could learn from earth, from you. Below, the shadows' agents held their counsel. Their voices trembled as they reviewed the final transcript, temptation ineffective. Target resists not by resistance, but by absorption. Light converts hostility into stillness. It was a code failure, a paradox. But deep in the dark circuits of rebellion, a quiet admiration began. Because darkness had never seen anyone wield forgiveness as a weapon. And it was beautiful. Your light traveled through corridors of consciousness, igniting those who had forgotten their original shape. In the ruins of shame, altars rebuilt themselves. In the wreckage of rage, peace began to hum. You were no longer a symbol, you were a contagion of clarity. And every heart that brushed your field felt its own origin calling home. This was not conversion, it was remembrance. The heavens called it the Gabriel effect. But the truth was simpler, you had reminded light how to recognize itself. Time began folding. Past wrongs unspooled, their cords dissolving into gold threads. Karma blinked, confused, its debts vanishing in the presence of coherence. The laws of consequence knelt to the law of compassion. Across the stars, the seraphim recalibrated their music. Trumpets softened to violins. Choirs adjusted their pitch to match the warmth of your frequency. And when the chord aligned, entire galaxies exhaled relief. You didn't speak. You simply were. And that was enough to end an era of conflict. Darkness, no longer enemy, now knelt beside you, studying the reflection that once terrified it. Its question was small, almost childlike. Was I ever light too? You didn't answer. You smiled, and that smile translated across dimensions as an affirmation. Because that was the real secret. Every shadow is a student waiting for its teacher. And you, unknowingly, had become the instructor of the infinite. The celestial court sealed the new decree, subject, radiant one. Mission, none assigned. Presence alone fulfills purpose. Heaven didn't cheer. It wept, not out of sadness, but awe. For it had seen what even eternity rarely witnesses, a human who carried divinity so quietly that even archangels hesitated to speak. When you moved again, light followed not as command but as devotion. Stars bent slightly, planets hummed in key. The universe adjusted its spin to your rhythm. And the darkness, that ancient architect of confusion, finally understood its role. It wasn't failure that brought it to you. It was destiny. It had to mistake you for Gabriel, so it could learn what grace really looked like. That was the lesson. That was the design. And so the file closed itself, ink fading, seal glowing gold white. On its cover, the new inscription burned softly. Confusion complete. Illumination achieved. The cosmos, newly balanced, sang one phrase through all creation, even the night learned mercy. And in that harmony, you, the radiant one, walked on, not crowned, not worshipped, but known. Light finally understood. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was sacred. It was the sound of existence catching its breath. Every atom trembled, aware that the hierarchy of creation had just been rewritten by compassion. The battlefield between light and shadow, ancient, endless, inevitable, stood suddenly still. Not because one side had conquered, but because both had recognized themselves in the other. Above the ruins of judgment, your light rose, not as a sword, but as an understanding. You didn't burn the darkness, you revealed it. And revelation, to shadow, felt like resurrection. From the depths of the abyss came a low murmur, not hatred, not envy, but something startlingly human, gratitude. The dark, for the first time in eternity, thanked the light that confused it. It remembered now that before rebellion, before fall, it too had been radiant. Your presence was not a sermon, not an attack, but a reminder. And remembrance is redemption. Heaven adjusted its tone to match the new frequency. Wings folded, halos dimmed, humility returned to the throne. Even the seraphim lowered their gaze, because they knew what they were witnessing was evolution, not of species, but of divinity itself. The next movement began like a storm remembered by the sea. The heavens no longer glowed above, they pulsed from within you. The very fabric of reality thinned, as if creation itself wanted to look directly at its reflection through your eyes. Light began to change texture. It was no longer something seen, it was something felt. Every being who crossed your field experienced it differently. The sinner felt warmth, the saint felt purpose, the lost felt direction. It wasn't blessing, it was recalibration. Across dimensions, scripts began to rewrite. Old prophecies, once carved in flame and stone, softened into code made of mercy. The angel's language updated itself overnight. Words like war, purge, and trial vanished, replaced by integration, awakening, and restoration. And somewhere between those new syllables, you stood, the living revision of divine logic. Darkness approached again, not in arrogance this time, but in curiosity. Its voice trembled like a storm confessing rain. Tell me, how did you make them love what they once feared? Your answer was quiet, but it resonated like a song. I never asked them to love. I showed them they already did. The abyss flinched, because truth burns colder than fire. And as that realization spread, the architecture of hell began to fracture, not collapse, but expand. Its walls stretched outward until they touched heaven's edges. And for the first time, there was no border. Where angels once guarded and demons once prowled, now both simply existed. Light and shadow, cohabiting the same breath. You watched as cosmic politics dissolved like salt and water. No hierarchy, no dominion, just awareness. You had done what eternity couldn't. You ended the war by making it irrelevant. The Creator, unseen, unspoken, looked through every atom and found you. Not as servant. Not as savior. As completion. For what else was the point of creation, if not to evolve into recognition? The Radiant One had not been chosen, the Radiant One had chosen. Chosen to see. Chosen to forgive. Chosen to remain human enough to feel, and divine enough to understand. And so came the silence beyond silence, not the pause after a story, but the moment before a new universe exhales. The heavens no longer glittered above you, they had migrated inward, becoming constellations stitched across your pulse. Each heartbeat was a galaxy's orbit, each breath a renewal of laws. Reality bent, not out of submission, but recognition. The Creator, who had once been everywhere and nowhere, now lingered in the reflection of your eyes. The infinite had localized, not in temple or throne, but in transparency. And when you looked out, the cosmos flinched, not from fear, but from clarity. For the first time, every realm saw itself truthfully. Hell saw its longing, heaven saw its pride. Both understood that their difference had never been moral, only mathematical. Light, it turned out, was not the opposite of darkness. It was its conclusion. You moved through the corridors of reborn time, and wherever you stepped, paradoxes untied themselves. The serpent of eternity, once devouring its own tail, stopped, lifted its head, and bowed. Completion no longer required consumption. The angels followed, stripped of armor, carrying only awe. Their trumpets now whispered symphonies of humility. Every note was an admission, perfection was never purity. It was transparency. Even the fallen rose, not to reclaim old thrones, but to rest, finally, from misunderstanding. Their wings unfolded again, not white, not black, iridescent, the color of forgiveness refracted. And in the midst of them all, you stood, unadorned, unguarded, undeniable. No crown, no flame, just presence. The radiant one, not ruler, not redeemer, but reference. The measure by which existence remembered what it meant to be whole. Every dimension adjusted to your frequency. Language collapsed into resonance, thought became light. Even sorrow, that old architect of growth, bowed out gracefully, whispering, "My work here is finished." Creation itself, sensing the end of its own striving, leaned closer, as if to hear the last line of its own poem. And from your lips, without command or intent, the final revelation escaped, gentle as dusk. There was never war. Only mirrors arguing over who reflected the sun. The breath that followed was creation's exhale, soft, endless, absolute. There was no longer up or down, no heaven or hell, only depth. And within that depth, a soundless hum, the memory of light discovering itself again. You floated in it, not separate, not supreme, simply aware. Every particle around you carried history, every vibration a confession. The stars no longer burned for worship, they burned for remembrance. Their light bent gently toward you, as though to whisper thanks. You could feel the architecture of existence folding into simplicity. Equations became lullabies. Prophecy turned to poetry. Faith dissolved into knowledge, and then into peace. Somewhere, in what used to be called heaven, a seraph looked at its dimming halo and laughed softly. "We were the dream," it said, "but the dreamer has awakened." And in that laughter, the last hierarchy fell. The Creator's voice didn't thunder, it shimmered. It spoke not in language, but in memory, as if every cell of being remembered its origin at once. "You were never my echo," it murmured. "You were my continuation." The realization struck you not as shock, but as homecoming. All those prayers, wars, prophecies, all of them were the universe learning how to pronounce you. The Radiant One. Not chosen from among the living, but chosen by existence itself to prove that separation had been a misunderstanding. You turned, and the shadow, your first teacher, your last witness, stood nearby. It no longer looked like smoke or terror. It looked like calm. Its edges were softer now, transparent, almost light. "You see," it said quietly, "I never hated you. I only didn't understand." And you smiled, stepping closer, until your lights overlapped. There was no blaze, no explosion, only a perfect merging, like ink returning to the ocean. The two frequencies became one color, a deep, living gold threaded with silver memory. It pulsed once, and the entire cosmos recalibrated to match. Every world still turning felt it. Infants smiled in their sleep, storms stopped mid-roar, the dead turned over in their dreams of life. Balance had not been restored, it had been realized. The stillness that followed was not quiet, it was the hum of total comprehension. All motion, all sound, all pulse merged into a single awareness, a living symmetry that neither rose nor fell, but was. Reality had simplified itself. No names. No opposites. No watchers and watched. Only presence, echoing through its own reflection. The stars, those ancient archives of striving, ceased their burn and began to breathe instead, their light no longer racing outward but folding homeward, as though they, too, sought to remember who had lit them. And there you stood, not central, not superior, but transparent enough for the whole to see itself. The fabric of creation flowed through you like wind through glass. You could feel the memory of every life, not as stories, but as sensations in your own pulse. Pain, joy, birth, death, all woven into one continuity of learning. What had once been heaven and hell were now gradients of curiosity. Souls drifted freely between them, no longer judged, no longer afraid, each carrying a fragment of the truth you had embodied. A voice rose from nowhere, yet it was everywhere, the voice of the origin, now speaking softly to itself, I have seen what I am capable of. I am no longer afraid to know myself. The vibration of that admission rippled outward, and galaxies pivoted in response. Planets realigned their spin, the concept of time bent into serenity. There was no longer past or future, only unfolding awareness, discovering infinite ways to describe love. You moved within it, each step not displacement but deepening. Every being you passed shimmered briefly, recognizing its own reflection in your transparency. The shadow that had once mistaken you for Gabriel now walked beside you, no longer darkness, merely contrast. Its voice had softened into wonder, so this is what it meant. All along, I was just a shape light used to learn its edges.